Jake Anderson, a 28-year-old banker with a sharp mind and a keen sense for detail, had always prided himself on his intuition. Married to Emily, a stunning woman with raven black hair and Mediterranean features, he thought he had the perfect life. They lived in Oakwood Heights, a picturesque suburb known for its charming houses and serene environment. Jake's job at a prestigious commercial bank in Manhattan had been rewarding, earning him 2 promotions in the past 3 years. Emily worked for a national medical insurance company in Fairfield, about 30 minutes from home. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in September when Jake first felt the pang of suspicion. He was backing his car out of the garage at 6:15 a.m., preparing to catch the 7 a.m. train to the city. As the garage door closed, he remembered how Emily had been unusually distant over the past few weeks. They used to have a vibrant morning routine, filled with laughter and shared coffee, but now it felt mechanical and cold. Jake's thoughts drifted back to a recent argument they had. He had forgotten to close the garage door 2 weeks ago, and Emily called him at work, furious and accusing him of being careless. The argument left a lingering tension in their home, and despite his apologies, Emily's behavior remained cold and distant. Jake couldn't shake off the feeling that something deeper was wrong. He tuned the car radio to his favorite country station, hoping the music would lift his spirits. As he drove to the station, a song about a troubled marriage played, resonating deeply with his own feelings. Absorbed in the song, he missed a green light and was jolted back to reality by the honking of impatient drivers behind him. Shaking off his thoughts, he continued to the station and caught the earlier 6:45 a.m. train to Penn Station. On the train, Jake reminisced about the first time he met Emily. It was a sunny day in July, right after his 16th birthday. As he mowed the lawn, a moving van pulled up at the house next door. A sleek BMW followed, and from it stepped the new neighbors, the Harrisons. From the back seat emerged Emily, the most beautiful girl Jake had ever seen. She was a few months older, with short hair, denim shorts, and a radiant smile that captivated him instantly. Gathering his courage, Jake introduced himself to Emily a few days later. They hit it off immediately, spending the rest of the summer together. There were no romantic gestures, just the pure joy of each other's company. When school started, they shared lunch and the bus ride home, but no classes together. Jake asked Emily to the October harvest dance, and she agreed. However, as the school year progressed, Emily made new friends and drifted towards the popular cheerleader crowd. The night of the dance, Jake's father drove them to the school. As they walked in, some football players smirked and laughed. Jake asked Emily what was going on, but she shrugged it off. They enjoyed the dance until a slow song played, and Billy Carter, the star linebacker, approached Emily. "Let's dance, babe," Billy said, taking Emily's hand. She left with him without a glance back at Jake. Stunned and humiliated, Jake watched as Emily and Billy danced closely. That night, Jake's heart shattered as he realized he had been replaced. Years later, as Jake reflected on that painful memory, he couldn't help but draw parallels to his current situation. He and Emily had reconnected after high school, eventually getting married. But now, the same feelings of betrayal and loss were creeping back into his life. At the office, Jake's colleague Tom, noticing his distracted demeanor, approached him. "Jake, what's going on? You've been off lately," Tom said with genuine concern. Jake sighed, unable to hide his worries. "I think Emily is having an affair." Tom's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "No, just a feeling," Jake admitted. "But my intuition is usually right." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "Your instincts are sharp, Jake. Don't ignore them. What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet," Jake replied. "I need to gather proof before confronting her." Over the next few days, Jake's suspicions grew. He started noticing little things: Emily's late-night phone calls, her frequent mention of a colleague named Ryan, and her sudden need to stay late at work. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Jake decided to subtly confront her. "How's work been?" he asked casually. "Busy as usual," Emily replied, not meeting his eyes. "You've been spending a lot of time with Ryan lately. Everything okay at the office?" Emily stiffened. "Yes, of course. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Jake said, watching her reaction closely. "You've mentioned him quite a bit recently." Emily forced a smile. He's just a colleague, Jake. Nothing more. Jake nodded, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. That night, he lay awake, his mind racing with possibilities. He needed to know the truth, and for that, he needed concrete evidence. The following morning, Jake confided in his high school friend, Mike, who worked as a private investigator. Mike listened intently as Jake explained his suspicions. "I need your help, Mike. I need to know if Emily is cheating on me," Jake said, his voice filled with desperation. Mike nodded. "I'll help you, Jake. We'll get to the bottom of this." Together, they devised a plan. Jake would place voice-activated recorders around the house and on the phones. Mike would follow Emily discreetly and gather evidence. The tension in Jake's home continued to rise as he set the plan in motion. One evening, while Emily was in the shower, Jake installed the first recorder in their bedroom. His hands trembled as he placed the device under the bed, hoping Emily wouldn't find it. He repeated the process in the living room and kitchen, hiding the devices in places where they would go unnoticed. For the next few days, Jake anxiously waited for the recorders to capture any incriminating conversations. He listened to the recordings each night, his heart pounding with every click and whisper. Finally, after a week, he heard a conversation that confirmed his worst fears. "Ryan, this is Emily. Why are you calling me at home? What if Jake hears?" Emily's voice was tense. "I'll make up a work excuse," Ryan replied. "I think we should back off. Jake is acting funny." "No, he hasn't accused me yet, but he's cold and distant. Maybe we should cool it for a while," Emily said, her voice wavering. Jake's heart sank as he listened to their conversation. The woman he loved was planning a secret trip with another man. The betrayal was worse than he had imagined. With his suspicions confirmed, Jake's sadness turned to anger. He needed more evidence, something undeniable that would prove Emily's infidelity. He decided to follow Emily to Miami, where she and Ryan were supposed to attend a business seminar. The thought of seeing his wife with another man made his blood boil, but he knew it was the only way to get the proof he needed. Jake took the day off work to prepare for the trip. He bought a round-trip ticket to Miami, a high-quality camera, and other surveillance equipment. He also changed his appearance, dyeing his hair and wearing a Yankees cap to avoid recognition. As the day of the trip approached, the tension between Jake and Emily grew unbearable. On Thursday evening, Emily finally mentioned her upcoming trip. "I've been asked to attend a seminar in South Beach. It's a great opportunity for my career. Do you mind if I go?" Emily asked, trying to gauge Jake's reaction. Jake forced a smile. "If it's important for your job, you should go. When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning. Ryan and I will be flying out together," Emily replied, looking relieved. "I'll drive you to the airport," Jake insisted, despite Emily's suggestion that Ryan could take her. He needed to see her off, to make sure she was really going with Ryan. The next morning, Jake and Emily drove to the airport in silence. As they approached the terminal, Jake's heart pounded with a mix of anger and sadness. He watched as Emily and Ryan checked in and headed towards security. Just before Emily handed her ID to the TSA agent, Jake pulled her back for a hug. "I love you, Emily. If anything happens, I want you to know you're the best thing that ever happened to me," Jake said, his voice trembling. Emily hugged him tightly. "I love you too, Jake. I'll be back before you know it." As Emily walked through security, Jake's resolve hardened. He would follow her to Miami and get the evidence he needed to confront her once and for all. The next chapter of their lives was about to unfold, and Jake was determined to uncover the truth. Jake Anderson spent the entire drive back from the airport consumed by a mix of anger and determination. He had watched his wife, Emily, walk away with Ryan, and now he needed to focus on gathering the evidence that would confirm her betrayal beyond any doubt. Upon returning home, Jake met up with his high school friend Mike, the private investigator. Mike was a tall, rugged man with years of experience in surveillance and undercover work. They sat in Jake's kitchen, sipping coffee and laying out their plan. "We need to be thorough," Mike said, his voice steady. "Every conversation, every interaction, we need to catch them in the act." Jake nodded. I've already placed the voice recorders around the house and on the phones. What else do we need? Mike leaned back in his chair, thinking. We need visual evidence, photos, videos, and we need to track their movements. I'll follow Emily and Ryan in Miami. You focus on monitoring the recordings here. The next few days were a blur of tension and activity. Jake spent hours each night listening to the recordings, his heart racing with each snippet of conversation. The recorders picked up mundane household sounds, but also captured moments that hinted at Emily's infidelity. On Wednesday evening, Jake's patience paid off. He heard Emily's voice on the recorder placed in their bedroom. Ryan, this is Emily. Are you alone? Yes, I'm alone. What's up? I'm scared, Ryan. Jake is acting strange. He's distant and cold. I think he knows something. Ryan's voice was calm. Relax, Emily. He doesn't know anything. Just stick to the plan. We'll be together soon. Jake's blood boiled as he listened to their conversation. The confirmation he needed was right there. He quickly transferred the recording to his laptop, saving it as evidence. He called Mike to update him on the progress. We've got them, Jake said, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and relief. I've recorded Emily and Ryan talking about their plan. Good, Mike replied. Keep gathering as much evidence as you can. I'll start tailing them in Miami tomorrow. The next morning, Jake received a text from Mike. They've checked into the hotel. I'll keep you posted. Jake's heart pounded as he read the message. He felt a mix of dread and anticipation, knowing that Mike was now following Emily and Ryan's every move. He spent the day at work, barely able to concentrate, his mind constantly drifting to thoughts of his wife and her lover. That evening, Jake received another message from Mike. Caught them at the pool. Got photos. We'll send tonight. Jake waited anxiously for Mike's email. When it finally arrived, he opened the attachment with trembling hands. The photos showed Emily and Ryan lounging by the pool, laughing and holding hands. One photo captured them in a passionate kiss, confirming Jake's worst fears. The sight of Emily with another man made Jake's stomach churn. He forwarded the photos to his laptop, adding them to the growing file of evidence. He knew he needed more, something undeniable that would leave no room for doubt. Over the next few days, Mike continued to send updates. He followed Emily and Ryan to restaurants, meetings, and even the beach, capturing photos and videos of their interactions. Jake's file of evidence grew, each new piece adding weight to his suspicions. On Saturday night, Jake received a call from Mike. We've got them, Mike said. I caught them checking into a hotel room together. I'm sending you the footage now. Jake's heart raced as he opened the video file. It showed Emily and Ryan entering the hotel room, their hands intertwined. The camera captured their kiss before the door closed behind them. It was the undeniable proof Jake needed. With the evidence in hand, Jake felt a surge of determination. He couldn't confront Emily yet. He needed to wait for the right moment. But he knew that the end of their marriage was inevitable. The betrayal was too deep, too painful to ignore. The next morning, Jake sat in his kitchen, reviewing the evidence. He listened to the recordings, watched the videos, and studied the photos. Each piece of evidence felt like a dagger to his heart, but he knew it was necessary. He needed to be sure, to have every detail lined up before he confronted Emily. As he sat there, his phone buzzed with a new message from Mike. They're planning to leave the hotel at noon. I'll follow them to the airport. Jake replied with a simple, thanks, his mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. He knew he needed to confront Emily soon, but he also needed to prepare himself for the fallout. That afternoon, Jake received a call from Mike. They're on their way to the airport. I'll send you the final report tonight. Jake's hands shook as he hung up the phone. He knew the moment of confrontation was drawing closer, and he needed to be ready. He spent the rest of the day organizing the evidence, making sure every detail was documented. When Mike's final report arrived, Jake read through it carefully. It detailed Emily and Ryan's every move, from their intimate moments at the pool to their check-in at the hotel. The report was thorough and damning, leaving no room for doubt. With the evidence in hand, Jake knew it was time to confront Emily. He sat down at his laptop, composing a message to her. Emily, we need to talk. I know everything. Meet me at home tonight. He hit send, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. He knew that the conversation ahead would be one of the hardest of his life, but it was necessary. He needed to confront Emily, to face the truth, and to decide the future of their relationship. As the evening approached, Jake prepared himself for the confrontation. He reviewed the evidence one last time, making sure everything was in place. He knew that tonight would be the turning point in his marriage, and he needed to be ready. Emily arrived home later than usual, her face a mask of confusion and fear. Jake stood in the living room, his laptop open on the coffee table. The evidence was displayed on the screen, ready for her to see. "Jake, what's going on?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Sit down, Emily," Jake said, his voice cold and steady. "We need to talk." Emily sat down, her eyes wide with fear. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "I know about you and Ryan," Jake said, his voice firm. "I have recordings, photos, and videos. There's no point in denying it." Emily's face went pale. "Jake, I can explain." "No," Jake interrupted. "I don't want your explanations. I want the truth. Why did you do it, Emily?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she struggled to find the words. "I don't know, Jake. I was lonely and Ryan was there. It just happened." Jake's heart ached at her words, but he knew he needed to stay strong. "It didn't just happen, Emily. You made a choice. You betrayed me." Emily's tears flowed freely now. "I'm sorry, Jake. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," Jake said, his voice breaking. "You hurt me more than you can imagine." The room fell silent as Jake and Emily sat facing each other, the weight of their broken marriage hanging heavy in the air. Jake knew that their relationship could never be the same, and the road ahead would be difficult. But he also knew that he needed to move forward, to find a way to heal and rebuild his life. With a heavy heart, Jake stood up and walked to the door. "I need some time to think," he said, his voice trembling. "I'll be staying at Mike's place for a few days. We can talk more when I get back." Emily nodded, her face etched with sorrow. "I understand, Jake. I'm so sorry." Jake walked out the door, the weight of the confrontation still heavy on his shoulders. He knew that the road ahead would be long and painful, but he was determined to find a way to heal and move forward. As he drove to Mike's place, Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The truth was out, and the first step towards healing had been taken. He knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face it head-on. Jake Anderson felt a heavy weight lift off his shoulders as he drove to Mike's place. The confrontation with Emily had been emotionally exhausting, but it was a necessary step toward uncovering the truth and moving forward. The evidence Mike had gathered was compelling, yet Jake knew that to fully come to terms with Emily's betrayal, he needed to see things with his own eyes. After a restless night at Mike's, Jake woke up early, determined to follow through with his plan. He checked his disguise in the mirror. Dark hair dyed black, sunglasses, and a Yankees cap, enough to make him unrecognizable to Emily and Ryan. Jake packed his bag with the camera, a new set of clothes, and other essentials for his trip to Miami. He reviewed the flight details one last time before heading to the airport. As Jake boarded the plane, he couldn't help but feel a mix of dread and anticipation. He knew that what he was about to witness would be painful, but he needed the closure to move on. The flight to Miami was uneventful, giving Jake ample time to steel himself for what lay ahead. He replayed the recordings and reviewed the photos on his laptop, each piece of evidence further solidifying his resolve. Upon landing in Miami, Jake wasted no time. He checked into a modest hotel near South Beach, not far from the Victor Hotel where Emily and Ryan were staying. Jake had chosen this location to keep a low profile while still being close enough to monitor their movements. After settling into his room, he called Mike to update him. "Mike, I'm in Miami. What's the latest?" Jake asked, his voice tense. "They're still at the Victor Hotel," Mike replied. "I've been following them discreetly. They have a seminar tomorrow morning, but I've seen them spend most of their time together. Be careful, Jake." "Thanks, Mike. I'll keep you posted," Jake said before hanging up. Jake spent the rest of the evening setting up his equipment. He placed the camera and the parabolic microphone in strategic positions, ensuring he could capture clear footage and audio without drawing attention. He tested the setup multiple times, adjusting the angle and focus to get the best possible shots of the hotel pool and common areas. The next morning, Jake woke up early and positioned himself on the balcony of his hotel room, which offered a clear view of the Victor Hotel's pool. He had disguised himself further with casual beachwear, blending in with the other tourists. He watched as guests lounged by the pool, waiting for Emily and Ryan to appear. Around mid-morning, Jake spotted them. Emily, wearing a bright red bikini that accentuated her curves, and Ryan, in a casual t-shirt and shorts, walked hand in hand to the poolside chairs. Jake's heart clenched as he watched them laugh and flirt openly. He turned on his camera, zooming in to capture every detail. As Jake observed, he saw Ryan lean in and kiss Emily on the cheek, his hand resting possessively on her thigh. Emily giggled and leaned back, basking in the attention. Jake's hands shook with a mix of rage and sorrow as he recorded their interactions. He adjusted the parabolic microphone, capturing snippets of their conversation. "You know, this is the best seminar I've ever attended," Ryan said, grinning. Emily laughed. "It's definitely more fun with you here. I feel like we're finally getting a break from everything." Ryan nodded, his gaze lingering on Emily's body. "I can't wait until tonight. We'll have the whole room to ourselves." Jake's stomach churned at Ryan's words. He clenched his fists, struggling to maintain his composure. He knew he needed to keep watching, to gather as much evidence as possible. After an hour of lounging by the pool, Emily and Ryan stood up and walked towards the hotel entrance. Jake quickly packed up his equipment, deciding to follow them discreetly. He changed into casual clothes and slipped on his sunglasses and cap, ensuring he wouldn't be recognized. Jake trailed them to a nearby cafe where they sat at an outdoor table, their heads close together as they talked. Jake found a seat a few tables away, pretending to read a newspaper while keeping an eye on them. He placed a small recorder on the table, hidden under a napkin, to capture their conversation. "I feel so free here," Emily said, sipping her coffee. "No responsibilities, no worries, just us." Ryan reached across the table, taking her hand. "We deserve this, Emily. We've been sneaking around for too long. It's nice to just be together without any pretense." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of excitement and guilt. "I just wish it could always be like this. But Jake, he's been so good to me. I never wanted to hurt him." Jake's heart twisted at her words. He knew that despite her betrayal, a part of Emily still cared about him, but it didn't lessen the pain of her actions. He continued to listen, his anger and sadness mingling as their conversation unfolded. After finishing their coffee, Emily and Ryan headed back to the Victor Hotel. Jake followed at a safe distance, blending in with the crowd. He watched as they entered the hotel and took the elevator to their room. Jake's mind raced with thoughts of what might happen next. He knew he needed to capture definitive proof, but the idea of witnessing their intimacy was almost unbearable. Jake waited in the hotel lobby, pretending to browse tourist brochures. He kept an eye on the elevator, waiting for the right moment. After about an hour, Emily and Ryan emerged, dressed in casual evening attire. They exited the hotel, heading towards the beach. Jake followed them to the shore, where they walked hand in hand, their silhouettes framed by the setting sun. Jake took out his camera, capturing the scene from a distance. The sight of Emily with another man in such a romantic setting felt like a punch to the gut. He forced himself to keep recording, knowing he needed the evidence. As the evening wore on, Emily and Ryan found a secluded spot on the beach. They sat down on a blanket, the sound of the waves providing a soothing backdrop. Jake positioned himself behind a nearby dune, his camera trained on them. He adjusted the parabolic microphone, straining to hear their conversation. "Ryan, what are we doing?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "We're living in the moment, Emily," Ryan replied, his tone soft and reassuring. "We deserve to be happy." "But what about Jake?" Emily's voice wavered. "He's going to find out eventually. I can't keep lying to him." Ryan sighed, wrapping his arm around her. "We'll deal with that when the time comes. For now, let's just enjoy this time together." Emily leaned into Ryan, their faces inches apart. Jake's heart pounded as he watched them kiss, their bodies entwined in the fading light. He captured every moment, his emotions a tumultuous mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. As the night deepened, Emily and Ryan stood up and walked back to the hotel, their arms around each other. Jake followed them at a distance, capturing their intimacy with a heavy heart. He knew that the evidence he had gathered was damning, but it came at a great personal cost. Back in his hotel room, Jake reviewed the footage and audio recordings. Each moment he watched and listened felt like a dagger to his heart, but he knew it was necessary. He compiled the evidence, preparing it for the confrontation that would inevitably come. Jake called Mike to update him on the progress. "I've got everything we need, Mike. Photos, videos, audio. It's all there." "Good work, Jake," Mike replied. "I know this is tough, but you're doing the right thing. We'll talk more when you get back." Jake hung up, his mind racing with thoughts of the confrontation ahead. He knew that revealing the truth to Emily would be one of the hardest things he had ever done, but it was necessary for his own peace of mind. The next morning, Jake decided to take a walk along the beach to clear his head. The sound of the waves and the salty breeze provided a brief respite from the turmoil in his heart. As he walked, he thought about the life he and Emily had built together, and how it had crumbled so quickly. Returning to his hotel room, Jake packed his belongings, ready to leave Miami. He took one last look at the evidence, ensuring everything was in order. He knew that the confrontation with Emily would be painful, but it was a necessary step towards closure. As Jake boarded the plane back to New York, he felt a sense of resolve. He had the evidence he needed, and now it was time to face the truth. The journey ahead would be difficult, but he was determined to find a way to heal and rebuild his life. Jake Anderson returned to New York with a heavy heart and a determined mind. He had all the evidence he needed, but the real challenge lay ahead. The confrontation with Emily loomed large in his thoughts, and he knew that it would be an emotional and tumultuous encounter. As he stepped off the plane and into the bustling airport, he felt a mixture of dread and resolve. He needed to see this through, not just for closure, but for his own peace of mind. Jake took a cab back to his house in Oakwood Heights. The journey felt longer than usual, his mind racing with memories and thoughts of what was to come. When he finally arrived, he took a deep breath before stepping inside. The house felt empty and cold, a stark contrast to the warm and loving home it once was. He went straight to his office, where he meticulously organized the evidence he had gathered. Photos, videos, and audio recordings were neatly arranged on his laptop. He reviewed everything one last time, ensuring that he had a clear and comprehensive case. Satisfied, he leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the upcoming confrontation pressing down on him. That evening, Jake called Emily. "Emily, we need to talk. Can you come home early tomorrow? It's important." Emily's voice sounded hesitant. "Sure, Jake. I'll be home by 6. The next day felt like an eternity. Jake tried to distract himself with work, but his mind kept drifting back to the confrontation. When 6 o'clock finally rolled around, he heard Emily's car pull into the driveway. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Emily walked in, looking tired but curious. "Jake, what's going on? You sounded serious on the phone." "Sit down, Emily," Jake said, his voice steady. "We need to talk." Emily sat on the couch, her eyes searching Jake's face for clues. "What is it?" Jake took a seat opposite her, opening his laptop and turning it to face her. "I know about you and Ryan." Emily's eyes widened in shock. "What are you talking about?" "I have recordings, photos, and videos," Jake said, his voice cold. "There's no point in denying it." Emily's face paled as she stared at the laptop screen. Jake played the recordings first, Emily's voice mingling with Ryan's, discussing their secret meetings and their plans. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she listened, the reality of her betrayal sinking in. "Jake, she began, but Jake held up his hand, stopping her. "Don't. Just watch," he said, clicking on the videos. The screen displayed footage of Emily and Ryan by the pool, laughing and kissing. It showed them walking on the beach, holding hands and talking intimately. The final video, captured by Mike, showed them entering a hotel room together. Emily covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. "Jake, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "But it did, Emily," Jake said, his voice breaking. "You made a choice. You betrayed me." Emily sobbed, unable to find the words to explain herself. "I was lonely, Jake. You were always so busy with work, and I felt neglected. Ryan was there, and it just happened." "Neglected?" Jake's voice rose, his anger bubbling to the surface. "I worked hard to provide for us, to build a future together, and this is how you repay me?" Emily shook her head, her tears flowing freely. "I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you, but I still love you, Jake. Please, can we find a way to move past this?" Jake's heart ached at her words. He wanted to believe her, to forgive her, but the pain of her betrayal was too deep. "I don't know if I can, Emily. You've shattered my trust, and I don't know if it can ever be rebuilt." The room fell silent, the weight of their broken marriage hanging heavily in the air. Jake knew that the road ahead would be difficult, and he wasn't sure if he had the strength to navigate it. Emily stood up, her face a mask of sorrow. "I understand, Jake. I'll give you some space, but please, know that I'm truly sorry." Jake watched as she walked out of the room, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the house. He felt a mix of relief and sorrow, knowing that the confrontation was only the beginning of a long and painful journey. The next morning, Jake called Mike to update him on the confrontation. "It's done, Mike. She knows I have the evidence." "How did she take it?" Mike asked, his voice filled with concern. "She's devastated," Jake replied. "But so am I. This is going to be a long road." "You'll get through it, Jake," Mike said reassuringly. "Just take it one step at a time." Jake spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process the emotional turmoil that had engulfed his life. He avoided Emily, spending most of his time at work or with Mike. The house felt emptier than ever, the memories of their life together haunting him at every turn. One evening, as Jake was sitting in his office, Emily knocked on the door. "Jake, can we talk?" Jake looked up, his heart heavy. "What is it, Emily?" Emily entered the room, her eyes red from crying. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about trust and betrayal. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to try to make things right." Jake sighed, feeling the weight of her words. "How, Emily? How do you expect to fix this?" "I want to go to counseling," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I want to understand why I did what I did and work on rebuilding our relationship. I know it's a lot to ask, but please, Jake, give me a chance." Jake's heart ached at her plea. He wanted to believe that things could get better, but the pain of her betrayal was still fresh. "I'll think about it, Emily, but I can't make any promises." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with hope. "That's all I ask, Jake. Thank you." As Emily left the room, Jake felt a glimmer of hope. He knew that the road to healing would be long and difficult, but perhaps there was a chance for them to rebuild what had been broken. The next day, Jake called a counselor and made an appointment. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to try. For the sake of their marriage, and for the sake of his own peace of mind. The counseling sessions were emotionally draining, but they provided a space for Jake and Emily to confront their issues head-on. They talked about their past, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Slowly, they began to understand each other better, and the walls of resentment and anger started to crumble. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Emily turned to Jake. "Jake, I know I've hurt you deeply, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making things right. I love you, and I want us to have a future together." Jake looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity and pain reflected there. "Emily, I want to believe you. I really do. But it's going to take time, a lot of time." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand, Jake, and I'm willing to wait, as long as it takes." The road to healing was long and fraught with challenges, but Jake and Emily faced it together. They took it one day at a time, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt and pain, but they persevered. Months passed, and Jake began to see a change in Emily. She was more attentive, more present, and genuinely committed to their relationship. Jake, too, worked on his own issues, learning to communicate better and prioritize their marriage. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Jake turned to Emily. "I think we're going to be okay, Emily. It's been a rough road, but I believe we can make it." Emily smiled, her eyes filled with hope. "I believe that too, Jake. Thank you for giving us a chance." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake and Emily held hands, feeling a sense of peace and connection that they hadn't felt in a long time. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face it together. The chapter of betrayal and pain was closing, and a new chapter of healing and hope was beginning. Jake and Emily were determined to write this chapter together, one day at a time. The months that followed the confrontation were a whirlwind of emotional turmoil for Jake Anderson. He had agreed to try counseling with Emily, and although the sessions were grueling, they offered a glimmer of hope. Yet, despite the progress they made, the wounds of betrayal remained fresh. Jake knew that their marriage was hanging by a thread, and the final confrontation with Ryan was inevitable. It was a crisp, cool day in early November when Jake received an unexpected text from Mike. "Ryan's in town. He's staying at the Midtown Hotel. Thought you'd want to know." Jake's heart pounded as he read the message. The thought of facing Ryan again filled him with a mix of rage and anticipation. He knew this was his chance to get answers, to confront the man who had nearly destroyed his marriage. He took a deep breath and called Emily. "Emily, we need to talk," Jake said, his voice steady but firm. Emily sounded apprehensive. "What's wrong, Jake?" "Ryan's in town. I'm going to confront him. I need to do this." Emily was silent for a moment. "Jake, please be careful. I don't want things to get out of hand." "I'll be fine," Jake reassured her. "I just need answers." That evening, Jake drove to the Midtown Hotel, his mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming confrontation. As he entered the lobby, he felt a surge of adrenaline. He spotted Ryan sitting at the bar, casually sipping a drink. Jake approached him, his heart pounding in his chest. "Ryan," Jake said, his voice cold and firm. Ryan looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. "Jake, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," Jake replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ryan hesitated but nodded. "All right, let's find a quiet place." They found a secluded corner of the hotel lobby, away from prying eyes. Jake sat down across from Ryan, his gaze unwavering. "Why, Ryan?" Jake began, his voice tinged with anger. "Why did you do it?" Ryan sighed, looking down at his hands. "Jake, I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. Emily and I, we connected. We were both unhappy and things just escalated." "Connected?" Jake's voice rose, his anger boiling over. "You destroyed my marriage. You think that's justifiable because you connected?" Ryan looked up, his expression pained. "I know it was wrong, Jake. I know I hurt you, but Emily was unhappy. She felt neglected, and I was there for her." "Neglected?" Jake's fists clenched. "I worked hard to provide for her, to build a life for us. You took advantage of her vulnerability." Ryan nodded, his face etched with regret. "I know, Jake. I'm sorry. I really am. But it wasn't just about taking advantage. I cared about her." Jake's anger simmered beneath the surface. "Do you still care about her, Ryan?" Ryan hesitated, then shook his head. "It's over, Jake. Emily and I ended things. I realized it wasn't right. She loves you, and I don't want to come between you anymore." Jake studied Ryan's face, searching for any sign of deceit. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Here," he said, showing Jake a string of text messages between him and Emily. The last message was from Emily, saying goodbye and that she wanted to work on her marriage with Jake. Jake read the messages, his anger slowly giving way to a mix of relief and sorrow. "Why are you here, Ryan? If it's over, why come back?" Ryan sighed. "I came for a business meeting. I didn't expect to see you, I swear." Jake leaned back, his mind racing. The confrontation had given him some answers, but it also left him with more questions. "Ryan, I'm warning you. If you ever come near Emily again, I won't be so forgiving." Ryan nodded solemnly. "I understand, Jake. I won't. I'm truly sorry for everything." Jake stood up, feeling a sense of closure. "Goodbye, Ryan." As Jake walked out of the hotel, he felt a strange sense of relief. The confrontation had been necessary, a way to face the man who had caused him so much pain. But now, it was time to focus on healing, on rebuilding his life and his marriage. Back home, Jake found Emily waiting for him, her eyes filled with worry. "How did it go?" she asked softly. "I talked to him," Jake replied, his voice weary. "He's out of our lives for good." Emily nodded, her eyes welling with tears. "Thank you, Jake. I'm so sorry for everything." Jake took her hand, feeling the warmth and sincerity in her touch. "We have a long way to go, Emily, but I'm willing to try." The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Jake and Emily continued their counseling sessions, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. The road to healing was long and difficult, but they faced it together, one step at a time. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the stars, Emily turned to Jake. "Jake, I know it's been a hard journey, but I believe we're getting stronger." Jake looked into her eyes, seeing the hope and determination there. "I believe that too, Emily. We've come a long way." Emily smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Thank you for giving us a chance. I love you, Jake." "I love you too, Emily," Jake replied, his heart full of hope. As they sat together, their hands intertwined, Jake felt a sense of peace. The wounds of betrayal were healing, and they were building a future together. The journey had been painful, but it had also brought them closer, making their love stronger. The chapter of their lives that had been marked by betrayal and pain was coming to a close. A new chapter was beginning, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter future. Jake and Emily were ready to face it together, one day at a time. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation with Ryan left Jake and Emily in a state of uneasy calm. Although the confrontation had brought some measure of closure, the road to healing their marriage was still fraught with challenges. They both knew that the journey ahead would require immense patience, understanding, and perseverance. Jake spent the next few days reflecting on the conversation with Ryan. He felt a mix of emotions, relief that Ryan was out of their lives, but also an underlying sense of sadness for what had been lost. The betrayal had left a deep scar, and Jake wondered if it would ever truly heal. Emily, on the other hand, was determined to make amends. She threw herself into their counseling sessions with renewed vigor, working tirelessly to rebuild the trust she had shattered. Each session brought its own set of challenges, but Emily faced them head-on, driven by a desire to prove her commitment to their marriage. One evening, as they sat on the couch after a particularly intense counseling session, Emily turned to Jake, her eyes filled with determination. "Jake, I want to do something special for us, something to help us reconnect." Jake looked at her, curious. "What do you have in mind?" "I was thinking we could take a weekend trip. Just the two of us, away from everything, a chance to focus on us," Emily suggested. Jake hesitated, the idea both appealing and daunting. "Where would we go?" Emily smiled. "I was thinking of the cabin in the mountains. We used to love it there." Memories of their past trips to the cabin flooded Jake's mind. It had been a place of peace and connection, a sanctuary where they could escape the pressures of daily life. "All right," Jake agreed, a tentative smile forming on his lips. "Let's do it." The following Friday, Jake and Emily packed their bags and drove to the cabin. The journey was filled with a mix of nervous anticipation and cautious optimism. As they approached the cabin, nestled in a serene forest clearing, Jake felt a sense of calm wash over him. The familiar sights and sounds of the forest brought back memories of happier times. Once they arrived, Emily set about making the cabin feel like home. She lit a fire in the fireplace, filled the space with soft, warm lighting, and prepared a simple yet delicious dinner. As they sat down to eat, Jake felt a sense of nostalgia and hope. "Remember the first time we came here?" Emily asked, her eyes twinkling. Jake nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Yeah, we got lost on the way and ended up arriving in the middle of the night." Emily laughed. "And we had to spend the first night sleeping in the car because we couldn't find the keys." Jake chuckled, the memory bringing a sense of warmth and connection. That was an adventure. They spent the evening reminiscing about their past trips, sharing stories and laughter. The cabin, with its rustic charm and cozy atmosphere, felt like a haven where they could reconnect and rebuild their bond. The next morning, they woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Emily suggested they go for a hike, and Jake agreed, eager to explore the beautiful surroundings. As they walked through the forest, the fresh air and natural beauty invigorated them. They reached a clearing with a breathtaking view of the mountains. Jake took Emily's hand, and they stood in silence, taking in the serene landscape. The moment felt sacred, a reminder of the love they had shared and the potential for new beginnings. "Jake," Emily said softly, breaking the silence, "I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for everything." Jake turned to her, his eyes reflecting the emotions swirling within him. "Emily, I know you are, and I'm trying to forgive, but it's going to take time." Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand, and I'm here for you, every step of the way." They continued their hike, the conversation flowing naturally. They talked about their hopes, fears, and dreams for the future. The openness and honesty in their dialogue brought a sense of intimacy that had been missing for so long. Back at the cabin, they spent the afternoon cooking together, a pastime they had always enjoyed. As they prepared a meal, Jake felt a sense of normalcy and connection returning. They talked, laughed, and shared moments of quiet companionship. After dinner, they sat by the fire, the warm glow casting a soft light on their faces. Emily leaned against Jake, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling a sense of closeness that had been absent for so long. "Jake," Emily said softly, "do you think we can really make it through this?" Jake looked into her eyes, seeing the vulnerability and hope there. "I believe we can, Emily. It's going to be hard, but we've come this far. We can't give up now." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Jake. I love you." "I love you too, Emily," Jake replied, his voice filled with sincerity. The weekend at the cabin proved to be a turning point. The time away from the pressures of daily life allowed them to reconnect and rebuild their bond. They returned home with a renewed sense of hope and determination. As the weeks turned into months, Jake and Emily continued their journey of healing. They faced setbacks and challenges, but they also celebrated small victories and moments of connection. The trust that had been shattered was slowly being rebuilt, one step at a time. One evening, as they were preparing for bed, Emily turned to Jake, her eyes filled with determination. "Jake, I want to renew our vows." Jake was taken aback. "Renew our vows?" "Yes," Emily said, her voice steady. "I want to reaffirm our commitment to each other, to celebrate the journey we've been on and the future we're building together." Jake felt a surge of emotion. The idea of renewing their vows felt like a powerful symbol of their resilience and commitment. "I'd like that, Emily. I'd like that a lot." They began planning the vow renewal ceremony, involving their closest friends and family. It was a chance to celebrate their love and the progress they had made. The ceremony was held in a beautiful garden, surrounded by nature and the people who had supported them through their journey. As Jake stood at the altar waiting for Emily, he felt a sense of peace and anticipation. When Emily appeared, walking down the aisle with a radiant smile, Jake's heart swelled with love and gratitude. She looked stunning in a simple yet elegant dress, her eyes reflecting the depth of her emotions. They exchanged vows, their words filled with sincerity and hope. As they held hands and looked into each other's eyes, they felt the weight of their journey and the promise of their future. "Jake," Emily said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I vow to always cherish and honor our love, to stand by you through the highs and lows, and to work every day to rebuild the trust we've lost. I love you with all my heart." Jake's eyes glistened with tears. "Emily, I vow to always be there for you, to communicate openly and honestly, and to never take our love for granted. I'm committed to our journey, and I love you more than words can express." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the crowd erupted in applause. The ceremony was a testament to their resilience and commitment, a celebration of the love that had endured despite the challenges. The road to healing was far from over, but Jake and Emily were ready to face it together. They had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, their love renewed and deepened. The journey had been painful, but it had also brought them closer, teaching them the true meaning of commitment and resilience. As they looked to the future, Jake and Emily felt a sense of hope and anticipation. They knew that challenges would come, but they were confident in their ability to face them together. The chapter of betrayal and pain was closing, and a new chapter of love and hope was beginning. Despite the renewed commitment to their marriage, the road to reconciliation for Jake and Emily was fraught with difficulties. The vow renewal ceremony had been a powerful moment of hope, but the shadows of the past still lingered. Both Jake and Emily knew that their journey was far from over. In the weeks following their vow renewal, Jake and Emily continued their counseling sessions. They faced each session with determination, addressing their issues head-on. However, the underlying tension of the past infidelity and betrayal still cast a shadow over their progress. One day, Jake received a call from his lawyer, Mark, who had been handling the legal aspects of their separation. "Jake, I need you to come into the office. We need to discuss the divorce proceedings." Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. Despite their progress, the reality of the legal process loomed large. "All right, Mark. I'll be there this afternoon." That afternoon, Jake sat in Mark's office, feeling a mix of apprehension and determination. Mark laid out the details of the divorce proceedings, highlighting the steps they needed to take to finalize everything. "Jake, I know this is tough, but we need to address these issues head-on." Jake nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of the implications. "I understand, Mark. What do we need to do?" Mark outlined the necessary steps: division of assets, custody arrangements, and the finalization of the divorce decree. As Jake listened, he felt the weight of the process bearing down on him. Despite their progress, the legal battle was a harsh reminder of the challenges they faced. After the meeting, Jake returned home, his mind heavy with the realities of the divorce proceedings. Emily was waiting for him, her eyes filled with concern. "How did it go?" she asked softly. "It's a lot to process," Jake replied, his voice weary. "But we need to face it. Together." Emily nodded, her resolve firm. "I'm here, Jake. Whatever it takes." The weeks that followed were filled with a whirlwind of legal meetings, document signings, and emotional discussions. Jake and Emily worked with their lawyers to divide their assets fairly, a process that brought back painful memories of their past. Each decision felt like a step closer to the end of their marriage, despite their efforts to rebuild. One evening, as they sat together reviewing documents, Emily turned to Jake, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Jake, I know this is incredibly difficult, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making things right, even if it means facing these legal battles." Jake looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity and pain reflected there. "I know, Emily, and I appreciate that. It's hard to navigate all of this." Emily reached out, taking Jake's hand. "We'll get through it, Jake, one step at a time." As the legal proceedings continued, Jake found solace in the support of his friends and family. His parents, who had always been a source of strength, offered words of encouragement and understanding. Jake's father, a man of few words but deep wisdom, sat with him one evening, offering quiet support. "Jake, I know this is tough, but you're a strong man. You'll get through this," his father said, his voice steady and reassuring. Jake nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude for his father's support. "Thanks, Dad. It means a lot." His mother, always empathetic and nurturing, provided a listening ear and a comforting presence. "Jake, you've got a good heart. You'll find your way through this." Emily, too, found support in her friends and family. Her mother, Diane, who had been devastated by the news of the affair, offered a mix of support and tough love. "Emily, you made a mistake, but you're my daughter and I love you. We'll get through this together." Emily's friends, who had initially been shocked and hurt by her actions, gradually came around, offering support and understanding. Sarah, her best friend, sat with her one afternoon, listening to Emily's fears and offering words of encouragement. "Emily, you're doing everything you can to make things right. That's all anyone can ask of you," Sarah said, her voice filled with empathy. The legal battles were arduous and emotionally draining, but they also provided a space for Jake and Emily to confront their issues head-on. Each meeting, each document signed, brought them a step closer to resolving the past and moving forward. One particularly difficult meeting involved discussing the division of their home. The house in Oakwood Heights had been a symbol of their love and shared dreams. Deciding its fate was a painful process, filled with memories and emotions. As they sat in their lawyer's office, reviewing the options, Jake felt a surge of emotion. This house, it's been our home. It's hard to let it go. Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know, Jake, but maybe letting go is part of healing." They decided to sell the house, a decision that brought both relief and sorrow. The sale of their home marked the end of an era, but it also provided a chance for a fresh start. As they packed up their belongings, Jake and Emily took the time to reminisce about the memories they had created in the house. Each room held a story, each corner a shared moment. The process of packing was both painful and cathartic, allowing them to confront their past and find closure. On the day they moved out, Jake and Emily stood in the empty living room, the weight of their journey heavy on their shoulders. "This place has been our home," Emily said softly, "but it's time to move on." Jake nodded, his heart heavy with emotion. "Yeah, it's time." They hugged, a gesture filled with both sorrow and hope. As they walked out of the house for the last time, they felt a sense of closure and a readiness to embrace the future. The finalization of the divorce decree brought a mix of relief and sadness. The legal battles had been exhausting, but they also provided a sense of resolution. Jake and Emily knew that their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face the next chapter of their lives. One evening, after the divorce was finalized, Jake and Emily sat together reflecting on their journey. "We've been through so much," Jake said, his voice filled with emotion. Emily nodded, her eyes shining with sincerity. "We have, and I'm grateful for every step, even the difficult ones." Jake reached out, taking Emily's hand. "I know we're not the same as we were before, but I believe we're stronger." Emily smiled, her heart filled with hope. "I believe that too, Jake. Thank you for standing by me." The road to healing and rebuilding was long and challenging, but Jake and Emily faced it with resilience and determination. They had navigated the storms of betrayal and legal battles, emerging stronger and more committed to their journey together. As they looked to the future, they felt a sense of hope and anticipation. The past was behind them, and a new chapter awaited. They were ready to face it together, one step at a time. The legal battles and the sale of their home marked significant milestones in Jake and Emily's journey towards healing. With the past gradually being put to rest, they focused on rebuilding their lives individually and together. They moved into separate apartments, giving each other the space needed to reflect and grow. Despite the physical distance, their bond remained strong, nurtured through continuous communication and shared experiences. The first few weeks in their new homes were both liberating and daunting. Jake immersed himself in his work, finding solace in the familiar routines of his job. His colleagues, aware of his struggles, offered support and understanding, making his transition smoother. Emily, on the other hand, took a leave of absence from her job to focus on her mental and emotional well-being. She started seeing a therapist regularly and joined a support group for people dealing with infidelity and marital issues. One evening, Jake received a call from Emily. "Jake, I've been thinking. Would you like to join me for dinner this weekend? There's something I want to discuss with you." Jake felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Sure, Emily, that sounds good. How about Saturday at 7? "Perfect," Emily replied, her voice tinged with both hope and nervousness. Saturday arrived, and Jake found himself standing outside Emily's apartment, feeling a mixture of emotions. He knocked on the door, and Emily greeted him with a warm smile. "Hi, Jake. Come on in." The apartment was cozy and welcoming, a reflection of Emily's personality. They sat down for dinner, the conversation flowing easily as they caught up on each other's lives. After dinner, Emily led Jake to the living room, where they sat on the couch, facing each other. "Jake, there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about," Emily began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been doing a lot of thinking and reflecting on everything that's happened. I know we've come a long way, but I also know there's still a lot to work through." Jake nodded, listening intently. "I agree, Emily. We've made progress, but there are still challenges ahead." Emily took a deep breath. "I want us to consider starting fresh, not just as a couple, but as individuals. I think we both need to find ourselves again before we can truly rebuild our relationship." Jake felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of understanding. "I think you're right, Emily. We've both been through so much. Taking the time to heal individually could be exactly what we need." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Jake, and I believe in us. But I also believe we need to be whole on our own before we can be whole together." Jake reached out, taking her hand. "I love you too, Emily, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their decision sinking in. It was a difficult choice, but they both knew it was necessary. They agreed to continue their counseling sessions, focusing on their individual growth while maintaining open communication and support for each other. The months that followed were a time of intense personal growth for both Jake and Emily. Jake started taking evening classes in photography, a hobby he had always been passionate about but never had the time to pursue. The creative outlet provided him with a sense of fulfillment and joy, helping him reconnect with himself. Emily, meanwhile, dedicated herself to volunteering at a local animal shelter. The experience brought her immense satisfaction and a sense of purpose. She found healing in helping others, and the unconditional love of the animals provided her with a much-needed source of comfort. Despite their focus on individual growth, Jake and Emily continued to spend time together, finding new ways to connect and support each other. They went on hikes, explored new restaurants, and even took a weekend trip to a nearby city. Each experience brought them closer, reinforcing their commitment to rebuilding their relationship. One afternoon, as they walked through a park, Emily turned to Jake. "Jake, I've been thinking a lot about our journey. I know we've both grown so much, and I feel ready to take the next step." Jake looked at her, curiosity and hope in his eyes. "What do you have in mind, Emily?" "I think it's time we move back in together," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. "We've taken the time to heal individually, and I believe we're ready to start fresh, together." Jake felt a surge of emotion. "I think you're right, Emily. We've come a long way, and I'm ready to take that step with you." They spent the next few weeks looking for a new place to call home. They found a charming townhouse in a quiet neighborhood, a perfect blend of their individual styles and shared dreams. Moving in together was a symbol of their renewed commitment and the start of a new chapter in their lives. As they settled into their new home, Jake and Emily continued to nurture their relationship. They maintained open communication, shared their hopes and fears, and supported each other's individual pursuits. The townhouse quickly became a place of love, laughter, and growth, reflecting the strength and resilience of their bond. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jake turned to Emily. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about our future. I want us to build a life together filled with love and adventure." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with love. "I want that too, Jake. I'm so grateful for everything we've been through. It's made us stronger. Jake took her hand, feeling a sense of peace and anticipation. Let's make a promise to each other, Emily, to always communicate openly, to support each other, and to never take our love for granted. Emily nodded, tears of joy in her eyes. I promise, Jake, to always be there for you, to cherish our love, and to face every challenge together. As they sealed their promise with a kiss, they felt a deep sense of connection and hope. The past was behind them, and a bright future awaited. They knew that challenges would come, but they were confident in their ability to face them together. The chapter of betrayal and pain had come to a close, and a new chapter of love, hope, and adventure was beginning. Jake and Emily were ready to embrace it, one step at a time, hand in hand.